Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and today I have some picks for you of perennials that are great for colder climates. Just catching up for those people who want the perennials but can't grow them in a zone 8 like I am. That's okay, there's plenty of perennials that are great for colder climates, and I'm focusing on this video on those that would even go down so far as zone 3, at least nominally. There may be a little bit of variation there based on where the information sources come from, but zone 3 is what I've selected here. First one on the list, you actually can look over my left shoulder to see Trollius urcuticus, or the orange globeflower. I'll get you some close-ups of that. Now I have 18 plants here, so I'm going to go relatively quickly here, but I'll get you some close-ups, and I'll also put the name in the upper right-hand corner or left-hand corner, depending on where it fits on the screen, of the botanical name and common name of the plant. Now the Trollius here is growing up to about 18 to 20 inches. It's a gorgeous globeflower, and the globeflowers in general actually do great in cold climates. This one particularly has orange highlights in the blooms and a darker center, which makes it very charming in the garden. You can snip off the flower heads for a rebloom later in the season, or you can let it go to seed because it will reseed even in cooler climates. Next up on my list, number 2, is Echinops bonaticus blue glow, or the common name is globe thistle. Now thistle, no, not quite. It's not troublesome in the garden, it's not spiny, but it does have those strap-shaped leaves on the base and then a long spike, a blue globe flower across the top. That's where it gets its name. That perfectly steel blue geometric flower across the top is worth its price of admission in the garden for sure, so I hope you look that one up. Third one on the list is Achillea, and I've chosen a cultivar named Heartthrob here. It has perfect red flowers with yellow centers. Gorgeous. More commonly you'll think of yarrow, that's the common name, as being kind of yellow or in mixes of yellow and pink and white. But there are some more vibrant colors on the market now, so totally worth looking for one of the brand new Achilleas for a spot in your garden. Number 4 comes from my silver themed garden here. This is Artemisia ludoviciana. Valerie Finis is the cultivar name, and you aren't going to get a great picture of it in the pot here, but you do get an idea of the look of the foliage. Very silvery, very spiky and upright. I'll get you a picture of it in the garden as well, but it's not really grown for the flowers in this case. It's grown for that foliage effect, and all of the Artemisias tend to be fairly hardy, but I'm just a little tired of the silver mound, so this is a better choice for me. Next, I want to give it up for the Delphiniums, which you all know for those tall, formal spikes in blue, pink, or white. But actually, one of the cool things about looking for interesting plants for a cooler climate is that within this same genus, Delphinium, you're going to find all sorts of variability. A lot of them are larkspur flowers that are held a little bit looser. I'm going to show you the belladonna delphiniums, and I've chosen one in powdery blue called Cliveden Beauty, which I've grown in my garden a lot, but also some with just really intense deep blue, but held as single kind of hummingbird looking flowers that I like a lot. So explore the delphinium group for sure. Next up is Aquilegia, or Columbine, and the cool thing about Columbine again is about its diversity. You can go from these deep purples and blues to pale pink to almost white. Some of the flowers are in singles, some of the flowers are very double and frilly, so really there's no excuse not to find a place for Columbines in your garden because they just have so much diversity within the group. Next up, I'm going to feature Heliopsis. Heliopsis being a perennial sunflower or a false sunflower. I've featured that recently in my video of unusual plants, and I featured one called Bleeding Hearts, which has these gorgeous orange through red tipped flowers and dark foliage, but it comes in a wide variety of colors, some of them with variegated foliage, many of them in great shades of yellow, and again, perennial, so you're not replanting these sunflowers every year. They come back for you. Next one up I want to talk about, and I know bearded irises, classic pick for colder climates, but in this case I'm going to talk about a couple of other groups, these Siberian irises, which don't have those bearded, they're not quite as large, and they just have clean, sharp coloration to the flowers, so wonderful. And also the Japanese iris, which isn't quite as hardy. I think it's probably more zone 4 or zone 5 for the Japanese irises, Iris insata, but again, some wonderful picks in there. So don't just stick with the standard old bearded German irises, but explore the other irises as well. And I'm also going to talk about a bee balm, Monarda, which Monardas are fairly hardy, but the one I'm picking out is a spotted bee balm. It's a native plant that I've grown in my garden for quite some time, native North American that is, and what it's characterized by is these mauve bracts to the flowers, and it is also fairly resistant to powdery mildew, which we know can be a problem for Monardas. So I'm picking that one, but certainly you can feel free to explore the whole group of Monardas because there are many of those that are good for zones 4 and zone 5. Well, I don't mind going with some of the classic recommendations, and in this case I'm going to talk about Sempervivum, or chicks and hens. Now this literally is the first plant I knew from my grandmother's garden. She had it in basic green and basic red, and that's all I knew about it. Then later on I come to find that it has a whole bunch of variety. Things that are silver or bluish almost. Lavender and old lace is a variety that's more in that mauve area. And then there's other ones that have newer patterns and newer colorations from a breeding program in the States. Chick Charms is the name of it. Have a look at that. There's Gold Nugget and a bunch of other ones that have cool new colorations on them. So I would give a fresh look at the chicks and hens for sure. Next up I want to talk about the Primula auricula group, which almost looks like it should be too dainty to live in such cold climates. The flowers have these very intricate patterns on them. I'll fill the screen with some pictures of those. That should light you up at least enough to look and see if you can find some of the Primula auricula group in your area. Next I'm going to talk about Gaillardia, a classic prairie plant, and you know, again, kind of known for its basic yellow flowers, but breeding advancements have brought in a whole ton of shades and more complex flowers, more double flowers. I like the one called Gaillardia Arizona Apricot is one of my favorites, but there's some in the Mesa group that I like a lot as well, and so much easier to grow now. It is one that is fairly short-lived in my area because we have these wet winters and mild winters and fluctuating above and below zero. I wonder if you could give me some feedback on how they survive in their more, I guess, native habitat of the prairies. Let me know. Speaking of the classic prairie plants, let's talk about Echinacea, which is another one that has just taken a real renaissance in special breeding that has brought in much more double flowers and a whole wider range of colors. I want to mention a few by name. I like Lemon Drop, which just has that feathery look to it now. Have a look if you can find Green Twister. Which is, I've got some close-up pictures here, but it'll stun you. And I don't think this one is actually as heavily bred as the others, but I just came across some seeds for one called Hula Dancer, which has, again, the classic drooping petals of the Echinacea, which I think will look neat in the garden once I get it to germinate. Next up, I want to talk about a plant called Comfrey. Now, Comfrey it can get a really bad reputation as a roadside weed or something that takes over areas. So wise to think of one, like I featured in a previous video, that is a sterile Comfrey, in this case Bocking 14 Comfrey, which still has the flowers, still has the foliage, still has all the benefits of Comfrey, but it doesn't actually set seeds. The bees enjoy it, has lots of nectar for them, but it never sets seed in the garden, and so it's a good choice. And again, you get into that sort of pink through blue flowers, and I like the look of it and the practicality of it an awful lot. I'm going to go handheld for these last three plants here to show you some that are coming up in my garden right now. This is Clematis recta Sirius Black. It is not a climbing clematis, but a herbaceous clematis that has these intensely purple foliage. Love it a lot, and I'll see if I can get you a more mature picture of it, but definitely worth seeking out. Next up, Brunnera Jack Frost. That's the one with the little forget-me-not flowers here. And again, star of the show is the foliage here. Look at those markings. Gorgeous plant in that same family with Comfrey or Borage, and just in those beautiful blue sprays of flowers. And I'm only going to take a small step to the right here to see Dicentra. and that's a bleeding heart. And bleeding hearts as a group tend to be fairly hardy. This one is a native Dicentra here. I believe it's Dicentra eximia, and you can see it has these sort of soft pastel pink flowers. Now while I'm looking at those, I'm going to transition over to see one with a slightly stronger color and interesting foliage look. And I think you can see that the Dicentra King of Hearts here has a far more silvery foliage and then those more intense pink flowers. Now the breeder of this shows it as a zone 5, but other conflicting sites give it down to about zone 3. So I'm not sure exactly what to trust on that, but certainly for some of those colder climates, this would be a good alternative. All right, that's it for my choices, and I hope you've enjoyed my selections. However, I have to assure you, you do not have to content yourself to what I've curated for you. I want to show you that on the Gelito website, you can do a search for Zone 3 seeds, and it comes up with something like 1,300 different results for perennials that grow well in Zone 3 or are hardy to that climate. So even though I've gone through some of the highlights here, there's definitely some gems in there that you can pick out, seed for yourself, and that is really one of the best ways in a remote area that you can obtain a whole bunch of interesting perennials that will be good for Zone 3, is to go through the seed websites and pick out those things that you can start for yourself. All right, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions about, say perennials, about roses, about plants in general, please drop those into the comments below the video. I'll see what I can do to help.